June Lockhart's name has returned to headlines around the world, not because of a new role, but because her century-long journey has come to a close. At 100, the legendary American actress leaves behind a legacy that shaped generations of television viewers and redefined the image of family, resilience, and quiet heroism on screen. Though she began her career in cinema, her true stardom was born from the small screen, a space that she transformed into something deeply human, emotional, and unforgettable. When June Lockhart took her first steps into film at the age of 13 in 1938, no one could have imagined that she would one day become the beating heart of one of America's most beloved television series. For nearly a decade, Hollywood kept her hidden in the shadows of minor roles, a gem waiting to be discovered. But when television exploded into living rooms across the United States, Lockhart found her kingdom. It was there, through warmth, grace, and unmistakable strength, that she became one of the most recognizable faces in American pop culture. Her breakthrough came with the timeless show Lassie, where she inherited the role of Ruth Martin in 1958 from Cloris Leachman. For 6 seasons, from 1958 to 1964, she embodied the perfect image of an American mother, strong, gentle, compassionate, and steadfast, at the heart of a small farm where loyalty, courage, and love were tested episode after episode. Alongside her on-screen husband Paul Martin, played by Hugh Riley, and her adopted son Timmy Martin, portrayed by John Provost, June Lockhart carried the emotional weight of a story that resonated across continents. Yet the real star of the show, of course, was the clever collie Lassie. The irony wasn't lost on Lockhart, who once famously said that Lassie was a fairy tale about people on a farm where the dog solves all the problems in 22 minutes, just in time for the last commercial. But even as the loyal dog stole the spotlight, it was Lockhart's quiet dignity, her unspoken emotion, and her ability to make every gesture matter that kept millions of viewers watching week after week. She didn't just play Ruth Martin. She was Ruth Martin, the soul of a world that represented everything Americans wanted to believe in during the uncertain years of the late 1950s. After her remarkable success with Lassie, June Lockhart did something few actresses of her generation dared to do. She completely reinvented herself. In 1965, when the world was falling in love with science fiction and the promise of space travel, Lockhart stepped into a new universe, both literally and metaphorically. She accepted the role of Dr. Maureen Robinson in Lost in Space, a series that would cement her status as one of the most influential women on American television. The show, a futuristic reinterpretation of The Swiss Family Robinson, followed a family of scientists lost on alien worlds. For Lockhart, the role was more than just a job, it was a transformation. Gone was the quiet, rural mother from Lassie. In her place stood a calm yet commanding figure, a woman of intellect and courage navigating cosmic dangers. She was no longer confined to the kitchen or the farm. She was leading her family through the unknown void of the galaxy. In interviews, she often joked about battling cardboard monsters and sparks, but behind the humor was a fierce dedication to her craft. She brought empathy to the coldness of space and warmth to a genre dominated by men. Viewers, especially young girls of the 1960s, saw in her someone who could be both a mother and a scientist, a nurturer and a visionary. It's no surprise that decades later, NASA would honor June Lockhart with its Exceptional Public Achievement Medal for inspiring generations of Americans to dream about the stars. But before television made her a household name, Lockhart had already carved her place in entertainment history. Her first major role came not in Hollywood, but on Broadway. In 1947, she stunned critics with her performance in For Love or Money, earning the Tony Award for Best Newcomer, a category that has since disappeared. The audience adored her natural delivery, her sharp wit, and her ability to make emotion feel effortless. She later donated that same Tony Award to the Smithsonian Institution in 2008, ensuring her early triumph would live on as part of America's cultural heritage. That gesture, quiet, selfless, symbolic, summed up the essence of who June Lockhart was. Fame was never her obsession. Legacy was. Her career in cinema may have started modestly, but she appeared in some of the most beloved films of Hollywood's golden age: Sergeant York, 1941, The White Cliffs of Dover, 1944, and Meet Me in St. Louis, 1944. In the latter, she played a New Yorker whose dance card is stolen by Judy Garland's character out of jealousy. A small but memorable moment that showed her charisma and poise even in limited screen time. Yet despite her talent, she often found herself typecast, boxed into roles that failed to reflect her potential. It wasn't until she made the transition to television that her brilliance truly found a home. Her connection to Lassie had actually begun long before the television series. In 1945, she appeared in Son of Lassie, playing the grown-up version of Priscilla, the girl originally portrayed by Elizabeth Taylor in Lassie Come Home, 1943. It was her gentle affection toward the dogs, both Lassie and her pup Laddie, that caught the attention of producers years later when they were casting the TV version. Fate, it seemed, had been leading her toward that role all along. The 1950s and 1960s marked Lockhart's golden decades. Beyond Lassie and Lost in Space, she appeared in numerous iconic westerns and dramas that defined American television: Gunsmoke, Wagon Train, Have Gun, Will Travel, and Rawhide, among others. She was a familiar face, yet never repetitive. Her performances were infused with honesty and humility, and directors praised her professionalism and warmth on set. Colleagues described her as the actress who never forgot a line, never raised her voice, and never made a scene unless the script required it. Her life off-screen was equally remarkable. Born in New York City in 1925 to actors Gene and Kathleen Lockhart, June grew up surrounded by the rhythm of stage rehearsals and the glow of studio lights. Her first appearance came at just 6 years old at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York in Deems Taylor's opera, Peter Ibbotson. When her father's success on Broadway earned him a film contract with RKO, the family moved to Hollywood. There, Gene Lockhart went on to appear in more than 300 films, while young June studied at Beverly Hills High School, where the children of actors mingled freely with rising stars. Hollywood wasn't just a dream to her. It was the family business. And yet, despite being born into show business, June Lockhart's success was earned, not inherited. Her work ethic was legendary. Friends recalled that she would arrive on set before everyone else, perfectly memorized, ready to deliver her lines in one take. She brought the same grace to her personal life, balancing her demanding career with motherhood. She married twice, first to Dr. John Maloney, with whom she had 2 daughters, Anne and June, and later to architect John Lindsay. Though both marriages ended in divorce, Lockhart maintained close relationships with her family, and her daughters would follow in her artistic footsteps. Her elder daughter, Anne Lockhart, became a well-known actress in her own right, even playing a younger version of her mother in the 1986 fantasy film Troll, a poetic full-circle moment that united 3 generations of actresses in one cinematic legacy. Even as she aged, June Lockhart's passion for her craft never dimmed. In the late 1960s, she joined the cast of Petticoat Junction as Dr. Janet Craig, proving once again that she could master any genre. During the 1980s and 1990s, she became a familiar face to soap opera fans through her recurring role in General Hospital, where she appeared for nearly 15 years. She also made playful appearances as herself on shows like It's Gary Shandling's Show and Roseanne, often poking fun at her own legacy with charm and humor. In 1998, when Lost in Space was adapted into a feature film starring William Hurt and Mimi Rogers, Lockhart made a brief but meaningful cameo as a holographic school principal, a wink to the fans who had loved her since the 1960s. More than 2 decades later, she lent her voice to Netflix's 2021 reboot of Lost in Space as the voice of Alpha Control, closing her career where it had once exploded into legend. What makes her story even more extraordinary is how her influence reached beyond entertainment. Over the years, countless NASA astronauts cited Lost in Space as one of the inspirations that fueled their childhood dreams. Lockhart frequently attended NASA launches, standing among real astronauts who viewed her not as an actress, but as a pioneer of imagination. In 2013, when NASA officially recognized her with the Exceptional Public Achievement Medal, it wasn't just for her acting. It was for her ability to make the idea of exploration feel personal, possible, and profoundly human. By the time she turned 100, June Lockhart had spent more than 8 decades in the spotlight. Her name graced 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, one for television, one for motion pictures, both dedicated on the same day, February 8, 1960. She was also nominated twice for Emmy Awards, first in 1953 and again in 1959 for her work in Lassie. But perhaps her greatest award was not one that could be held or displayed. It was the love of generations who grew up watching her, who saw in her the embodiment of kindness and perseverance. When she appeared at public events in her later years, the audience would often rise to their feet in spontaneous applause. She was no longer just an actress. She was living history. Her very presence seemed to bridge eras, from black and white television to streaming platforms, from analog rockets to space exploration in the digital age. Her final years were filled with warmth, family, and gratitude. She often said that her greatest joy was knowing that her work had meant something to others, that somewhere out there, a child dreamed bigger because of me. June Lockhart's passing may mark the end of an era, but her legacy remains immortal. Through her compassion, intelligence, and timeless performances, she taught the world that a woman could be everything: an artist, a scientist, a mother, and a dreamer. In every sense, she was the beating heart of American television's golden age, and her light continues to shine, not just on screens, but in the boundless space of memory and inspiration. The brilliance of June Lockhart's life was not only in her talent, but in her endurance, an extraordinary ability to evolve with the times while remaining unmistakably herself. As the television landscape shifted through the decades, Lockhart adapted with effortless grace. In the 1970s and 1980s, when many of her contemporaries quietly faded from the screen, she was still there, appearing in family dramas, sitcoms, and even voice roles that introduced her to new generations. For Lockhart, acting was not a career. It was a calling that stretched across a century of storytelling. Her remarkable versatility allowed her to cross genres seamlessly. Westerns, comedies, science fiction, hospital dramas, she did them all with the same sincerity. One week she might play a pioneer woman facing hardship, the next, a doctor saving lives, and later a matriarch guiding her family through the stars. What made Lockhart so unique was her ability to bring humanity to every performance. She didn't act for the spotlight. She acted to tell stories that mattered. Even in her smallest appearances, she gave audiences a sense of familiarity, like a trusted friend returning to the screen. By the mid-1980s, she was a beloved presence on General Hospital, one of the longest-running soap operas in television history. For nearly 15 years, she appeared on and off as Nurse Elizabeth Liz Matthews, a role that embodied both warmth and authority. Younger actors often sought her advice between takes, describing her as a living encyclopedia of Hollywood. She shared stories about filming in the early days of television, where everything was live and one mistake could send the entire cast scrambling. But she never spoke with bitterness or nostalgia, only with gratitude. "I've been lucky," she would say. "I got to work in an era when everything was new, and then I got to see what it all became. Her humor remained as sharp as ever. When asked in a 1990 interview whether she missed the glamour of her Lassie days, she smiled and said, "I never thought there was much glamour in milking cows next to a dog that always hit its mark before I did." That blend of wit and humility defined her. She could laugh at her own image while still commanding deep respect from fans and colleagues alike. Lockhart's connection with NASA continued to grow over the years. She became an honorary guest at several space launches, often speaking to astronauts before takeoff. One of them reportedly told her, "Ma'am, you made space feel like home." It was perhaps the greatest compliment an actress could receive. Her portrayal of Maureen Robinson had not only captured hearts, it had inspired real exploration. When she received NASA's Exceptional Public Achievement Medal in 2013, she was deeply moved. Standing before a crowd of scientists, engineers, and astronauts, she said, "If a story can make one child look up at the night sky and dream, then that story has done more than entertain. It has given hope." Even as she aged, Lockhart never retired from public life. She attended conventions, film festivals, and television retrospectives well into her 90s. Her signature smile, perfectly styled hair, and calm demeanor became symbols of Hollywood's golden era preserved in human form. She was proud of her legacy, but never boastful. When fans thanked her for inspiring them, she always turned the compliment around. "You're the reason I kept going." Her devotion to her family remained unwavering. Her daughter Anne often spoke about growing up with a mother who was both a star and a steady grounding force. "She never brought Hollywood home," Anne said in a 2017 interview. "She brought laughter, warmth, and a sense of wonder. She treated our lives like another story worth telling." Their bond deepened when they worked together on Troll in 1986, a quirky fantasy film that has since gained cult status. June played Eunice St. Clair, a wise and mysterious witch, while Anne portrayed the younger version of her character. It was a symbolic handing of the torch, a cinematic reflection of a legacy passed from mother to daughter. The 1990s and 2000s saw Lockhart return to her most iconic roles through guest appearances and tributes. When Lost in Space was reimagined as a feature film in 1998, she accepted a cameo, appearing as a holographic school principal. The scene lasted only moments, but audiences erupted in nostalgia. It was as if the universe of their childhood had suddenly become whole again. 2 decades later, Netflix invited her back once more, this time lending her voice to the rebooted series in 2021. At 96, she recorded her lines as the voice of Alpha Control, the same mission control that guided her fictional family through the cosmos half a century earlier. That voice, steady, maternal, reassuring, was a time capsule of everything television once represented. Throughout her life, June Lockhart embodied dignity. She was part of a vanishing generation of actors who valued professionalism above fame, discipline above drama. She never courted scandal, never chased attention, and yet she remained one of the most beloved figures in American entertainment. Her colleagues often remarked that June Lockhart made goodness interesting. It was true. In a business that often rewards controversy, she made virtue magnetic. By the time she celebrated her 100th birthday, tributes poured in from across the world. NASA posted a message thanking her for inspiring its explorers. Fans of Lassie shared photos and memories online, many describing how they grew up wishing she were their mother. Castmates from decades past called her the eternal light of Hollywood. And June, always composed, simply said, "I'm grateful that the stories we told still matter." Her longevity was not just physical, it was spiritual. She had lived through the transformation of entertainment itself, from radio to black and white television, from Technicolor cinema to the streaming age. She had seen the art form evolve, but she had never lost faith in its power to move hearts. She believed in the emotional truth of performance. "Whether it's on a stage or a screen, you're still reaching for the same thing," she once said. "You're trying to make someone feel less alone." June Lockhart's final years were peaceful, filled with the affection of her family and admiration from the world she had helped shape. She remained sharp, articulate, and endlessly curious about the future. When asked what advice she would give to young actors, she replied, "Learn everything you can, stay humble, and remember, acting isn't about being seen, it's about helping others see." And that was the essence of her legacy. June Lockhart was more than an actress. She was a storyteller of compassion. Her characters, mothers, doctors, explorers, reflected the values she lived by: empathy, intelligence, and courage. Every smile she gave on screen seemed to carry the quiet message that hope is never out of reach. When the news of her passing broke, it sent a ripple of sadness through Hollywood and beyond. But in that grief was a shared recognition. The world had lost one of its purest lights. Her image, forever calm, graceful, and radiant, remains etched into the collective memory of millions. The little girl who once stood on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera had grown into a woman who touched the stars, both on screen and in spirit. And somewhere out there, in the imagination of every child who looked up at the night sky because of Lost in Space, June Lockhart's voice still echoes softly, reminding them that the universe is vast, but kindness even more so. June Lockhart's extraordinary journey through the 20th and 21st centuries was not merely a tale of longevity, it was a chronicle of transformation. She embodied the evolution of American entertainment itself, from the early black-and-white days of experimental television to the streaming era of the digital age. Yet, through every decade, every role, and every cultural shift, she remained a symbol of quiet dignity, intellect, and emotional authenticity. To understand her influence is to understand the heartbeat of an era when television was not just a form of entertainment, but a mirror of family, morality, and hope. Lockhart's presence on screen always carried a kind of moral authority. Even when surrounded by fantastical plots or whimsical settings, she anchored her characters with realism and grace. In Lassie, she represented the moral center of the American home, patient, wise, and deeply empathetic. In Lost in Space, she became the embodiment of calm intelligence in the face of cosmic danger, a mother figure who steadied not just her on-screen children, but the millions of young viewers watching from their living rooms. She once said in an interview that the greatest compliment she ever received was when a mother told her, "My children listen to you more than they listen to me." For June, that was proof that acting could transcend fiction. It could touch lives. Her influence on women in Hollywood was profound, though she never positioned herself as a feminist icon. Instead, she led by example. At a time when women were often relegated to ornamental or dependent roles, she portrayed characters who were capable, self-possessed, and emotionally complex. Whether she was holding a stethoscope, piloting a spaceship, or comforting a child, she radiated the same sense of authority that had long been reserved for male figures on television. This quiet breaking of boundaries inspired countless women to pursue careers in science, acting, and leadership. NASA even credited her portrayal of Dr. Maureen Robinson as one of the cultural sparks that encouraged young women to imagine themselves among the stars. Behind the professionalism and polished performances, Lockhart carried a genuine love for the craft of acting. Those who worked with her spoke of an almost old-world dedication, scripts meticulously annotated, lines rehearsed with precision, costume details checked personally before each take. She had inherited that discipline from her parents, Gene and Kathleen Lockhart, both classically trained actors who treated theater as both an art and a moral duty. Her upbringing in a household of rehearsals, costumes, and late-night stage discussions instilled in her a reverence for performance that never faded. "My parents taught me that acting is not about being seen," she once recalled. "It's about making truth visible." Perhaps what made her legacy even more remarkable was her humility. Despite a resume that spanned nearly 9 decades and over 150 screen credits, Lockhart never considered herself a star. She viewed fame as a side effect, not a goal. To her, success was measured not in awards, but in the letters from viewers who said her characters had helped them through difficult times. Over the years, she received countless fan messages, some from children who had grown up watching Lassie, others from adults who remembered her as a beacon of kindness during their youth. She kept many of those letters, carefully stored in boxes labeled with dates and locations. They were her trophies, her proof that the work mattered. In later interviews, Lockhart often reflected on the pace of change in the entertainment industry. She was fascinated, not threatened, by technology. While others her age lamented the loss of the old Hollywood, she embraced the possibilities of streaming, digital cinematography, and virtual production. When asked about the future of storytelling, she said, "As long as people have hearts, there will be stories. The screens may change, but the need doesn't." Her optimism about the next generation of artists and creators was infectious. Young actors who met her at conventions described her as a mentor without trying to be one. Her later years were a testament to her endurance and vitality. Even in her 90s, she remained radiant, attending award shows, space-themed events, and charity galas. She frequently spoke at NASA gatherings where she was treated not as a guest from Hollywood, but as a symbolic member of their community. When she received the Exceptional Public Achievement Medal in 2013, she stood among astronauts and engineers who had once been children watching Lost in Space. The moment was profoundly emotional. Many attendees later said that seeing her receive the medal felt like witnessing a reunion between fiction and reality, a bridge between imagination and achievement. Lockhart's personal life was marked by the same balance of strength and tenderness that characterized her performances. Her marriages may not have lasted, but they left her with 2 daughters who adored her. Her home in California became a sanctuary filled with mementos from her career, scripts, photographs, and fan letters, but also family portraits, children's drawings, and shelves of books on science, history, and art. Visitors often remarked that her house felt less like a celebrity's mansion and more like a living museum of warmth and creativity. Even in her final years, she hosted gatherings where actors, scientists, and fans mingled freely, drawn by her generosity of spirit. Her daughter Anne Lockhart often spoke about the profound influence her mother had, not just on her career, but on her worldview. "She taught me that the world doesn't owe you admiration," Anne said. "It owes you the chance to do something meaningful. And when that chance comes, you give it everything." That philosophy carried through the generations, turning June's legacy into a living tradition. The media often described Lockhart as America's television mother, but such a title, while affectionate, barely captures the scope of her influence. She was a bridge between art and ethics, between the innocence of early television and the sophistication of modern storytelling. When Lassie first aired, America was still recovering from war, seeking stability and hope. Her portrayal of Ruth Martin gave families that sense of safety. A decade later, Lost in Space arrived during an age of scientific ambition and Cold War anxiety. Once again, she offered calm amidst chaos, proving that human compassion could survive even in the vacuum of space. When June Lockhart turned 100, tributes came from all corners of the globe. Astronauts, actors, and fans alike celebrated her as one of the last living links to Hollywood's golden generation. The Hollywood Walk of Fame saw a flood of flowers at her 2 stars, one for motion pictures and one for television. Social media platforms filled with images of her as Ruth Martin, as Maureen Robinson, and as herself, elegant, smiling, timeless. NASA's official account posted a photo of her medal with the caption, "For inspiring us to dream beyond Earth." Her passing at the age of 100 was met with an outpouring of affection and nostalgia. News anchors spoke of her as a symbol of integrity, while her colleagues remembered her laughter and wit. Fans wrote that she had been part of their childhood, part of their families, part of their dreams. To many, she represented a kind of storytelling that no longer exists, gentle, sincere, yet profoundly powerful. In an age of spectacle, June Lockhart reminded the world that quiet grace could move mountains. Today, her image endures not just on film reels and streaming archives, but in the collective consciousness of American culture. She remains a symbol of what entertainment can achieve when guided by empathy rather than ego, and of how one life, lived with purpose, can illuminate generations. Her journey from the Metropolitan Opera stage at 6 years old to the endless stars of Lost in Space mirrors the very trajectory of humanity, ever reaching higher, ever believing that there is always more to discover. June Lockhart didn't just act in stories, she was a story, one of perseverance, intelligence, and love. And as the curtain falls on a century defined by her light, the lesson she leaves behind feels universal. That kindness is a force of nature, imagination is the truest frontier, and a life dedicated to both can echo across time like a signal sent into the stars. June Lockhart's story did not end with her final appearance on screen. It continued to resonate through the memories, hearts, and dreams of those who grew up under the gentle glow of her presence. Her century-long life was not a mere succession of roles, but a testament to the enduring power of empathy, intellect, and quiet courage. Every chapter of her journey seemed to mirror the evolution of American society itself, from post-war innocence to the restless curiosity of the space age, and finally to the boundless connectivity of the modern digital world. Through it all, Lockhart stood as a symbol of integrity in an industry often built on illusion, a reminder that authenticity could shine brighter than any spotlight. In her later interviews, June often reflected on the unlikely arc of her life. "I was a child who got to live her dream for 100 years, she said softly during one of her final public appearances. How many people can say that? That humility was disarming. Even after decades of acclaim, she spoke with the same grace as the young girl who once stood beside her parents in A Christmas Carol back in 1938. Her words were never about her own greatness, but about gratitude for the craft, for her colleagues, and for the audiences who welcomed her into their homes week after week. It was easy to forget that behind that familiar television smile was a woman of great intellect and curiosity. Lockhart was known to read voraciously, devouring books on astronomy, history, and philosophy. She once admitted that during the filming of Lost in Space, she would study real NASA reports between takes, fascinated by the scientific discoveries that paralleled the fiction she portrayed. That same curiosity made her a beloved guest at science conventions and educational programs, where she encouraged young people to keep looking up. In many ways, she became a cultural ambassador between Hollywood and the scientific community, bridging art and exploration in a way few others ever could. Lockhart's fascination with science was no mere publicity gesture. When the Apollo 11 astronauts returned from their mission in 1969, she attended one of the commemorative events and was deeply moved. "It was like watching our show come true," she later said. Except this time the bravery wasn't written in a script, it was real. She became close friends with several NASA scientists and astronauts, some of whom credited her portrayal of Maureen Robinson as the first scientific mother figure on television, a woman whose intellect was as vital as her compassion. It was a radical image at the time, one that quietly shifted how families saw women in positions of authority. Lockhart's portrayal of strength through gentleness became a model for countless later characters in film and television. Her connection with fans remained one of the most touching aspects of her later years. Well into her 90s, she continued to attend conventions, fan expos, and reunions. Audiences would line up for hours to meet her, clutching faded Lassie lunchboxes or Lost in Space posters. When it was their turn, she didn't rush them. She listened. Many would tell her that she had been their childhood hero, or that her shows had brought comfort during difficult times. Some cried. Lockhart always held their hands and replied with the same warmth. "You gave me as much as I gave you." Those who met her often said that she radiated a calm, almost maternal presence that felt no different from the characters she played on screen. Her co-stars echoed that sentiment. John Provost, who played her son Timmy in Lassie, described her as a second mother. Billy Mumy from Lost in Space called her the heartbeat of the set, adding that she brought discipline without ever raising her voice. "If June was there," he once said, "you behaved. Not because you were afraid, but because you respected her." That unspoken authority carried her through every phase of her career. Directors loved working with her because she was prepared, professional, and unfailingly kind. She had no ego, no diva habits, no demand for attention, just quiet excellence. Her public image as America's television mother sometimes overshadowed the depth of her artistry. June was not merely playing idealized women, she was portraying strength in its most human form. Her characters endured hardship, loss, and uncertainty, yet never surrendered to cynicism. She believed that storytelling could teach resilience. "We were making more than television," she said in a 1985 interview. "We were reminding people how to care for one another." When the Netflix adaptation of Lost in Space premiered in 2018, Lockhart, then in her 90s, was delighted. She praised the new cast, saying they had captured the spirit of wonder that defined the original. Her cameo voice role in the 2021 season finale as Alpha Control was a poetic closure, uniting past and present. The younger actors were in awe of her. During the recording session when she read the final line, "This is Alpha Control, Godspeed Robinson family," the room reportedly fell silent. The words carried the weight of 6 decades of history and emotion. It was as if the universe of Lost in Space had come full circle. In private, Lockhart remained as gracious as ever. She lived quietly, surrounded by family and a lifetime's worth of memories. Her home was filled with photographs, candid snapshots of film sets, stills from old performances, letters from colleagues, and mementos from NASA events. One wall displayed her 2 stars from the Hollywood Walk of Fame in framed replicas, a reminder of the rare honor she held, one for television, one for motion pictures. Yet she never treated them as trophies. "They belong to everyone who worked beside me," she would say. Acting is never done alone. Even near the end of her life, June Lockhart was still learning, still curious, still participating. Friends described her as sharp-minded, her voice soft but confident. She continued to give interviews, often through video calls, reflecting on the early days of television and how storytelling had evolved. "What I loved most," she once said, "was the sense that we were building something together, a bridge from imagination to reality." Her death at the age of 100 was met with widespread mourning, but it was also a celebration. News outlets across the world honored her with tributes, retrospectives, and heartfelt essays. Former co-stars shared stories of her kindness. NASA issued a statement calling her a visionary who inspired generations to reach for the stars. Social media was flooded with black and white photos of her in Lassie and color stills of her in Lost in Space, accompanied by words like grace, warmth, and legend. What made June Lockhart's passing so impactful was not just her fame, but what she represented. She stood for an era when television was about connection, between families, between generations, between dreams and reality. Her work had touched people across time and continents, transcending language and technology. Even those who had never seen Lassie or Lost in Space could recognize her image, The serene smile, the confident eyes, the unmistakable aura of compassion. In the final analysis, June Lockhart's legacy is one of humanity's better angels. She showed that fame could coexist with humility, that success could be rooted in decency, and that imagination could guide progress. Her life was not defined by scandal or spectacle, but by consistency, a quiet, enduring brilliance that outlasted the noise of changing eras. She lived through wars, revolutions, and the rise of technology, yet remained unwaveringly grounded in kindness and artistry. There is a profound symbolism in how her most famous roles both revolved around the theme of home. In Lassie, she protected the home on Earth. In Lost in Space, she searched for a home among the stars. That duality, earthbound love and cosmic wonder, became the essence of her life story. She reminded the world that no matter how far we travel, in space or in time, we are always seeking belonging, family, and hope. As tributes continue to flow, one truth remains undeniable. June Lockhart's light will not fade. She may have left the stage, but her voice echoes in the laughter of old reruns, in the curiosity of young dreamers, and in every story where kindness triumphs over adversity. Her career was a constellation of moments that, when viewed together, form a portrait of one of America's most enduring cultural icons. She once said, "If I've done anything worthwhile, it's because I believed in the goodness of people." And indeed, her century of work stands as proof of that belief. June Lockhart was not just a performer. She was a beacon, a guiding star who lit the way for dreamers, scientists, and storytellers alike. And somewhere, perhaps among the distant stars she once navigated on screen, her spirit continues its eternal voyage, calm, radiant, and forever lost in space, only in the most beautiful sense of the word. June Lockhart's story, like the long arc of a comet across the night sky, never truly dimmed. It only changed its hue as it traveled through time. The final chapter of her life was written not in fading light, but in the quiet radiance of remembrance. For a century, she stood as a bridge between eras, the daughter of theater legends, the face of television's golden age, and the living link between imagination and reality. Even as the camera stopped rolling, her influence continued to ripple outward, shaping generations of artists, scientists, and dreamers who grew up under her spell. Her legacy did not end with her passing. It only entered a new orbit, one illuminated by gratitude and awe. In her last decades, June Lockhart became something more than an actress. She became a living archive of cultural history. Journalists who visited her described a home that was less a residence and more a time capsule of Hollywood itself. The walls were lined with framed photos from Lassie, Lost in Space, Petticoat Junction, and Broadway posters from her Tony Award-winning performance in For Love or Money. There were personal letters from Judy Garland, Elizabeth Taylor, and Ronald Reagan, as well as handwritten notes from astronauts who had thanked her for inspiring them as children. On a bookshelf sat the NASA medal she received in 2013, glinting softly beside a model of the Jupiter 2 spaceship from Lost in Space. Every corner of her home breathed history, but more importantly, it breathed love. Visitors often remarked on her humility. Despite having met presidents, walked red carpets, and graced television screens for nearly 80 years, June never lost her sense of wonder. She would light up when talking about young actors finding their first role, or children who discovered old reruns of Lassie on streaming services. "It's funny," she once said, "people tell me that Lassie is old-fashioned, but kindness never goes out of style." That line became a kind of unofficial epitaph among fans after her death. Kindness never goes out of style. Lockhart's enduring relevance was remarkable. When most stars of her generation faded into nostalgia, she continued to appear at conventions and award ceremonies well into her 90s. She attended Lost in Space anniversaries, sitting beside actors who were now grandparents themselves. The crowds would erupt when she walked in, standing ovations, tears, applause that seemed to stretch on endlessly. Younger attendees, who hadn't been born when Lassie first aired, found themselves captivated by her presence. There was something timeless about her composure, a blend of elegance and gentleness that transcended trends and decades. She often spoke about gratitude in those moments. "I've been given more love than I ever expected," she said during one 2018 event. "It feels like my whole life has been a conversation with people I've never met." That sentiment captured who she was, a performer who didn't perform at the audience, but for them, inviting them into her world with sincerity and warmth. Her daughters, Anne and June Elizabeth, continued to care for her in her later years, ensuring that she remained surrounded by family. They described her as sharp as ever, always asking questions about new movies, new discoveries, new technologies. Even in her 90s, she learned to use a tablet, scrolling through old photos and watching clips of Lost in Space online. "Can you believe people still watch this?" she asked once, laughing. "We were pretending to walk on planets made of cardboard." Yet she loved that people still found joy in it, that a show made with primitive effects could still ignite imaginations in the age of virtual reality. The respect she earned within the scientific community was extraordinary for a performer. NASA, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and several space advocacy groups regarded her as an honorary ambassador. She attended rocket launches, documentary screenings, and even educational panels where she spoke about the power of science fiction to shape curiosity. One young astrophysicist recalled meeting her at a launch event and being overcome with emotion. She told me, "If you reach for the stars, you'll always find light." I wrote that on my office wall. She changed how I see everything. June's influence extended far beyond entertainment. Her image became a cultural touchstone, a reminder of a gentler, more hopeful vision of America. During uncertain times, her reruns offered comfort, stability, and moral clarity. Families who once gathered around black and white televisions to watch Lassie now streamed the same episodes for their grandchildren, discovering that the themes of loyalty, empathy, and courage had not aged at all. It was as if June's performances were written in the language of timeless truth. Her final public message, shared in a recorded interview at age 99, was characteristically elegant. "If there's one thing I hope people remember, it's that imagination is not an escape. It's a bridge. It connects what we are to what we might become." That statement was replayed on television after her passing, and it struck a chord worldwide. Newspapers from Los Angeles to London ran tributes celebrating not just her artistry, but her humanity. Obituaries described her as the First Lady of Family Television, the mother of modern science fiction, and Hollywood's eternal heart. After her death, the tributes poured in like waves. NASA shared a photograph of Earth from orbit with the caption, "For the woman who helped us dream beyond the horizon, thank you, June." The Academy of Television Arts and Sciences released a statement calling her a foundational figure in the history of American storytelling. Actors across generations, from those who worked with her in the 1950s to rising stars in 2025, posted messages of admiration. Anne Lockhart wrote perhaps the most touching tribute. "My mother didn't just act. She listened, she cared, and she believed in people. That's why the world believed in her." Even months later, the ripple effects of her passing were still being felt. Retrospective documentaries revisited her impact on television and science fiction, and museums began curating exhibits featuring her costumes, scripts, and personal memorabilia. The Smithsonian Institution planned a permanent section dedicated to women who shaped television, with June Lockhart as one of its central figures. Her Tony Award, donated to the museum years earlier, would once again take center stage, shining under glass as a symbol of a woman whose artistry spanned every medium. The magnitude of her legacy lies not in her fame, but in her permanence. Few entertainers have managed to remain beloved for so long, across so many generations. Her face, voice, and demeanor became woven into the cultural DNA of America, a nation that grew up watching her teach compassion and courage. From the innocence of the Lassie farm to the vast frontiers of Lost in Space, she represented a moral constant, a belief that goodness, though often quiet, is indestructible. As the years pass, June Lockhart's story will continue to echo through the collective memory of audiences worldwide. Her life reminds us that success is not about glory, but about giving meaning. She lived through a century of unimaginable change. The birth of television, the dawn of spaceflight, the rise of digital media, and she embraced it all with open arms. Her spirit was both grounded and infinite, her talent both precise and transcendent. She was, in every sense, a pioneer. If one could summarize her journey in a single image, it would be this: a woman standing beneath the glow of studio lights, looking up toward an unseen sky, her expression calm, yet full of wonder. That was June Lockhart, forever poised between the familiar and the infinite, between the warmth of earth and the call of the stars. Her passing marked the close of a golden era, but her legacy endures like a beacon, reminding every generation that imagination is humanity's greatest gift. In the end, June Lockhart did what few can claim. She lived not just in history, but as history. And though the final curtain has fallen, the audience she touched, millions strong, spanning continents and decades, remains standing, still applauding, still inspired, still looking up to the sky where her light, gentle and steady, will forever shine. June Lockhart's story closes not with silence, but with the lingering echo of a century of wonder. Her legacy, like the soft hum of an old television set that once flickered in living rooms across America, continues to vibrate with emotion, memory, and meaning. Few performers in history have spanned so many generations or bridged so many worlds. Hollywood and science, family and fantasy, earth and the stars. Her passing at 100 years old was not merely the end of a life, but the completion of a story arc that began in the earliest days of cinema and extended into the digital age. And yet, it feels incomplete, because June Lockhart's presence still lingers everywhere, on screens, in hearts, and even in the sky. What makes her legacy so uniquely powerful is that it transcends entertainment. To many Americans, June Lockhart was not just an actress. They grew up with her. She was a fixture of their daily lives, a gentle voice that narrated their childhoods and quietly influenced the way they viewed kindness, responsibility, and courage. When families gathered around black and white television sets in the 1950s to watch Lassie, she was there every Sunday evening, a mother who offered comfort, wisdom, and calm through every crisis. Her voice, tender yet firm, carried the moral weight of the time, that compassion was strength and love could overcome any hardship. That message, repeated week after week, shaped the moral compass of millions. When the era of optimism gave way to the era of exploration, Lockhart evolved once again. As Dr. Maureen Robinson in Lost in Space, she became the embodiment of forward-thinking femininity. Her character was a scientist and a mother, a dual identity rarely portrayed on screen in the 1960s. She inspired not through rebellion but through balance, showing that intelligence and nurturing could coexist in perfect harmony. In doing so, she quietly shifted cultural expectations of women in entertainment and beyond. For young viewers, she became the model of what a modern woman could be: confident, capable, and endlessly curious. The impact of Lost in Space was greater than anyone predicted. Beyond its whimsical aliens and futuristic gadgets, it spoke to the spirit of the space race, to America's hunger for discovery. It told children that the universe was not to be feared, but explored. And at the heart of it all stood June Lockhart, radiating warmth even amid the cold expanse of space. Her portrayal of Maureen Robinson became a cornerstone of the show's success, so much so that decades later, real astronauts would credit her for sparking their fascination with spaceflight. That is perhaps the greatest measure of her artistry. She didn't just entertain, she inspired action in the real world. As the decades passed, the image of June Lockhart came to symbolize endurance. Her longevity was not merely physical, it was emotional, creative, and spiritual. Unlike many stars of her generation, she never retreated into obscurity. Instead, she embraced change. She joined the cast of General Hospital in the 1980s, staying relevant in an era defined by youth-driven television. She made guest appearances on comedies like Roseanne and It's Gary Shandling's Show, where she often poked fun at her wholesome image with delightful irony. She wasn't afraid of self-parody because she understood that her legacy was secure. She had become part of the cultural fabric. Her relationship with her audience was always reciprocal. They gave her admiration, and she gave them reassurance, a sense that someone like her existed in the world, gracious, kind, principled. Fans often described meeting her as a deeply emotional experience. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did respond, it was never with the inflated self-importance of a star, but with genuine curiosity. She asked questions about their lives, about their families, about their dreams. She had that rare gift, one admirer once said, of making you feel that you were the most interesting person in the room. Even after she retired from active work, Lockhart continued to appear at conventions, film retrospectives, and charity galas. Her speeches were never nostalgic laments for the past. They were lessons in gratitude and perseverance. She often said, "Every role teaches you something about love. If you can't find that, you're not acting. You're just pretending." To her, the art of acting was a spiritual discipline, a lifelong study of empathy. She treated every character, from Broadway ingenue to spacefaring matriarch, as an opportunity to understand humanity a little better. Lockhart's influence on women in the arts cannot be overstated. She came from a lineage of performers, but she forged her own path in a time when the industry offered few substantial roles for women over 30. She broke that invisible ceiling through quiet strength, redefining what maturity could look like on screen. She proved that motherhood and leadership could be equally compelling, that women could command respect not by loud rebellion, but by steady excellence. Many actresses who followed her, ranging from Helen Mirren to Sigourney Weaver, have cited her as a model of grace and professionalism. Her devotion to the intersection of art and science remained unbroken until the end. She kept close ties with NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, even attending educational panels well into her late 90s. At one event, when asked why she was still advocating for science at her age, she smiled and replied, "Because curiosity doesn't retire." That quote spread across social media, becoming one of the most beloved phrases associated with her name. It captured everything about her essence: endless curiosity, humility, and wonder. In her later years, she lived quietly with her daughters and grandchildren, who often described her home as a sanctuary of light and laughter. Friends and visitors said the atmosphere felt magical. Walls lined with vintage movie posters, family photos, and framed letters from fans. There was no sense of ego or display, only warmth. She loved to cook, to tell stories about the early days of Hollywood, and to reminisce about filming in cold studios where cardboard moons hung from wires. She laughed about it all, yet spoke with reverence about how much those moments had meant. As her centennial birthday approached, tributes came pouring in from across the globe. The Academy of Television Arts and Sciences sent her flowers and a personal message. NASA hosted a virtual salute to her contribution to public imagination. Fans organized online watch parties of Lassie and Lost in Space. June herself marked the occasion with quiet gratitude. 100 years, she said in a recorded message, and I still feel like I'm just getting started. That optimism, that eternal youthfulness of spirit was what defined her most. Her passing in 2025 was met with both sorrow and celebration. Television networks aired special retrospectives. Newspapers ran features with headlines like "The Star Who Never Stopped Shining." On social media, tributes poured in from people who had never met her but felt as if they had. Astronauts shared stories of watching Lost in Space as children before their first space launches. Families posted photos of their grandparents watching Lassie. Generations connected through the same glow of her presence. In that sense, June Lockhart had achieved something extraordinary. She had united people across time. Even in death, her light endures. Every time a rerun of Lassie plays, every time someone discovers Lost in Space, for the first time, her spirit is revived anew. Her legacy isn't confined to awards or accolades. It lives in the quiet moments when a viewer, perhaps late at night, feels comforted by her voice or inspired by her courage. That is the truest immortality, the one that outlives fame and time. If June Lockhart taught the world anything, it was that imagination is not fantasy. It is faith. Faith in people, faith in possibility, faith that the stories we tell can make the world kinder and larger than it is. From her first role as a child in A Christmas Carol to her final voice performance as Alpha Control in Netflix's Lost in Space, she built a career that reflected the very best of human aspiration. And now, somewhere beyond the reach of any camera, one imagines her exactly as she always was. Elegant, composed, and smiling softly beneath the infinite stars she once pretended to explore. The lights of Hollywood will continue to shine, but among them, one glows brighter and steadier, guiding those who come after. That light belongs to June Lockhart, actress, dreamer, pioneer, and eternal mother of the cosmos. June Lockhart's journey reminds us of something timeless, that kindness, talent, and grace never fade. She lived a century filled with meaning, art, and inspiration, touching hearts across generations. She showed the world that true greatness doesn't come from fame or fortune, but from how deeply we care, how much love we give, and how bravely we live with purpose. Her smile, her voice, her gentle strength, all of it remains a part of who we are. Every scene she played, every word she spoke, carried light into millions of homes, teaching us compassion, hope, and faith in humanity. Now it's our turn to give something back. If June Lockhart's story moved you, if you grew up watching Lassie or dreaming with Lost in Space, take a moment to keep her memory alive. Let's honor her by spreading that same warmth she gave to the world. Let's celebrate her legacy by sharing it with others, so new generations can discover the woman who inspired astronauts, actors, and dreamers alike. Please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel, not just for the story of June Lockhart, but for everything she stood for: love, imagination, and the courage to believe in something greater. Every click helps her light reach one more heart. Let's keep her star shining, forever bright, forever kind, forever June Lockhart.